Houston Cougars, a furious comeback to knock off Duke and advance to the national championship game.
Here is Zion Chris, big hole, open sesame. Zion Chris, wow, the 72-yard house call.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby. Yes!
Welcome to the Scott and Holman podcast. We have a lot of favorite times of the year doing the show, but August of every year as we go into the Cougar athletics season, and the podcasts that we do around this time of the year are definitely among our favorites. As of this moment, we are just over 2 weeks away from the start of Houston Cougar football. Woo! Gotta love it. Tonight we are breaking the seal, previewing the 2025 Cougar football season. We're talking defense and special teams, leading the previews off with those units as is custom here. And we have in a mere 3 days, probably 2 or less to you, to the listener, we have a U of H team taking the field for a regular season contest that counts as a win-loss, or I guess technically also possibly a tie in this sport. We'll be previewing that team as well, your Houston Cougar soccer program, who hired a head coach that I think we're both pretty excited about going to a new era for that program. Bobby, I know it has been a busy few days outside the pod for both of us, podcasting and life, otherwise, I just kind of alluded to. How you doing, friend?
Dude, I am fantastic. It is birthday tomorrow. Actually, when everyone's hearing this, it will be my birthday. So I'm really excited for that. Got some big plans this upcoming weekend. So looking forward to that. But, most importantly, like you said, this is the time of year where you start to believe your team's going to win about 4 more games than they probably actually are going to, or that logically you think they're going to win. This is the time of the year where you start counting down the days. You know, it was funny. I was talking to you, we were talking, and I was like, oh man, it's we have like 2 more episodes. We really need to really start previewing this football team because it's about to start. So I'm really excited about that. Preseason football in the NFL has started. You can turn on the TV just about any night now and catch at least some football highlights. It's just it's a wonderful time of the year. Kicking off Cougar sports is the best. We've made it almost all the way through the wilderness, and we are here for some Cougar sports, even if it's not football. We are previewing Cougar athletic programs, and it's super exciting.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned it's a hope springs eternal kind of year. We aren't specifically doing the go down the schedule and count the wins for this preview episode, but I was doing that apropos, not specifically that. I actually was making plans to be in Houston for the Cougs Big 12 opener against Colorado, was making sure I got the date right, all that jazz. And I was kind of looking through, I'm like, am I being a little pessimistic with only 6 wins here? I was like, I can make a case. I think we even texted about it. I was like, making a case to myself for 7, 8, even 9 wins. It's truly wonderful time of the year. Before we get to that previewing, got to plug our Patreon, patreon.com/SH podcast. We did a full slate of off-season episodes, none of which are really that out of date at this point. We did the 2-part vibe check episode, covering every U of H athletic team, the vibes around them, a full breakdown of the 2025 Cougar football transfer class, all the interviews that Bobby did up at Big 12 Media Days in Frisco with Willie Fritz and the U of H players who were in attendance, and a behind-the-scenes look with Dustin at the making of our season 10 finale podcast feud episode, and of course, Bobby and I's Connor Wigman film room, looking at the guy likely to be your next Cougar starting quarterback in a couple of his Texas A&M games. If any of those episodes and just the general idea of supporting the internet's longest-running U of H independent podcast sounds good to you, please head on over to our Patreon, patreon.com/SH podcast, and a quick plug for our network friends and partners at the 1012 Network, at TEN12 Network, wherever you do social media. And please subscribe to the 1012 podcast wherever you put podcasts in your ears. Bobby, I believe that's all the housekeeping. I've been waiting literal months to say this. Let's preview some Houston Cougar football, buddy.
Let's do it, man.
So as we've done for, I believe, every season except for our very first one, where Dustin and I kind of started that one right at the beginning of the 2015 football season, which candidly wasn't a bad season to start doing a podcast about the Houston Cougars.
Did something good happen that year?
Yeah, it's fine. I mentioned this today. Won't get too sidetracked, but we did do a week 1 preview that we opened with an FCS team that year, Tennessee Tech, and the audio was so bad that Dustin and I both listened to about 5 minutes and we're like, there's no way we can release this. Like, this is absolutely not. We expected it to be bad audio, but I'm like, this is not usable. It sounded like I was this close to the microphone, and it sounded like Dustin was like at the end of a long hallway. Because only my mic was picking anything up. I was probably too close to it, all that fun stuff. So we ended up, our true first episode, if you go back all the way, probably in your podcast feed, is previewing Louisville and recapping Tennessee Tech. So for the 10th time, Bobby, in our 11th season of existence, we're leading off previewing the Cougar defense and special teams. And why is that, Bobby? Because defense wins championships. Definitely won't find teams that are good at offense winning championships too, or teams that are just good all around.
Yeah, wait, you mean to tell me, as a Houston Cougar fan, defense, we had good defenses in 2015 and in 2011 and 2020. Oh, those were good defenses. It had nothing to do with
2011, a little questionable there, admittedly, if you haven't blocked out all the details of the game against Southern Miss from your mind, though.
I don't recall that game.
No, good,
I don't recall that game.
I'm working to become like you. I was gonna make a self-effacing joke about like defense correlates to the good team. That's why we've only had a really good team like 3 times in the last like 15 years. But in all seriousness, much as last season and last season's offense was a brutal watch, the 24 Cougar defense was one of the stronger groups I feel like we've watched. Now looking back on those 12 games, when it's all said and done, but going into the season, I didn't re-listen to our defensive preview, but I think I'm summarizing you and I's thoughts pretty well here, saying that we liked a number of last year's transfers on paper. We liked the DC hire of Shield Wood, but the 2 seasons before that were so bad that I don't think either of us were super willing to come on here and saying, oh yeah, this is going to be a really good defense, and ended up being one of the better Cougar defenses that I would say the two of us have watched in our 20-ish years of following this program. You have the whiplash of that defense being unexpectedly awesome, but then you have the expected departures of Keith Cooper Jr., Michael Batten, Jamal Moore's graduation, and less expected departure of your DC Shield Wood to Texas Tech. And then you had key projected returners, AJ Halsey, Anthony Holmes, and Jeremiah Wilson. Ultimately transfer out. Hershey McLaurin was also supposed to be one of those graduating guys, ended up getting another year of eligibility, transferred to Purdue with that extra year of eligibility. Though, to be fair, you did also get the benefit of getting Rice's Dean Connors for an unexpected season off that eligibility ruling. So the cupboard's not entirely bare. You have some key guys back: Latrell McCutcheon, Kentrell Webb, Carlos Allen, among others. Bobby, I think I kind of wanted to start this here. What do you think is a fair expectation for what this defense can be in 2025? A defense, I guess, that we hope is going to be good enough to support a team capable of taking a couple wins at least, step forward in the win column.
So I think a fair expectation, Sam, I think really is you are expecting a little bit of a step back here. I think if you aren't expecting a step back, you're kind of being a little naive. You lost a lot of top talent, right? I think the staff did a really good job of, we lost like the top tier players, but the ones you mentioned, but on the other side of it, you brought in more depth, it seems. Maybe the ceiling isn't as high as it was last year, but I think you've raised the floor significantly with this. I think the Austin Armstrong hire has some reasons for you to be excited, but there's also some concerns. I think it would be kind of unfair to just say that there's not some concerns with it. He obviously has a lot of talent. He was hired onto a Georgia staff back in 2019. He's already a really young coordinator, but for that Georgia staff to see something in him at that young of an age really says a lot. His defenses at lower levels, most notably Southern Miss, were actually pretty damn good. His final defense at Southern Miss finished 40th in SP+. I know you go Southern Miss, who do they play, things like that, but SP+ ranks for all that, right? Like, that's kind of its whole thing, and to finish 40th in SP+ is a pretty big deal for a program like Southern Miss. And then you kind of saw him head to Florida, and just looking at the stats, it's easy to be excited about his stint in Florida. Like, you kind of get excited about it. But as I kind of, when he was hired, when I kind of started reading on it, he clearly lost play calling duties at that Florida job. And you actually kind of see, like, the game he gave up play calling duties was actually like the game where Florida's defense like took a significant step forward, and that's a little concerning, right? Like you want to be excited because you get a DC from Florida, but yeah, I think there's some talent here. I think there's a lot of talent on this. We're gonna go through all the different units, so I'm not gonna call people out just quite yet, but I think there's a lot of talent on this defense, and I think you have a lot of potential with your coordinator, with your defensive coordinator. So I fully expect this team to take this defense to take a step back. But what you're hoping for is that you don't take too far a step back where you go back to the defenses of a couple of years ago, those final Holgorsen defenses that were just bad.
I would agree. There's a reason why you mentioned it, why Kirby Smart was willing to hire this guy as a QC guy, not a former Division I player either. So I mean, not saying former D1 guys can't be qualified assistant coaches, but he didn't have that inside track of being a former Division I player to get on a staff.
Like a grad assistant.
Exactly. Nick Saban had hired him before he took the Florida DC job. He'd actually been hired to be the linebackers coach at Alabama, but obviously elected to take a defensive coordinator job in the SEC at age 29. At age 29, this guy was hired to be an SEC defensive coordinator off of 2 good seasons at Southern Miss. To add on to what you said there, that he produced 2 good defenses on teams that had, I think his first year, a catastrophically bad offense, and his second year, a below average offense. So he was working with that handicap. He was working with the handicap of Southern Miss being a hard place generally to win the last decade or so, and still produce defenses that you didn't have to squint at to see them being good. But also, I'll say it even more bluntly than you, Austin Armstrong won't be missed by Florida fans from his time as defensive coordinator there. But there's still a lot to like on his resume, but just the time at Florida doesn't need to be sugarcoated. He wasn't very good there as an SEC defensive coordinator, and you could probably attribute most of their improvement last year to them handing the play calling duties to Ron Roberts, a veteran defensive assistant who had a co-coordinator title there with Armstrong. And admittedly, the previous fan base wasn't sad this coach was gone, ends up being a good predictor of future success far more than it's not. But also, you can't be fair to the guy and not say, hey, everything on his resume before Florida is really fucking impressive. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe any honest assessment of the guy should overlook the fact that he got an SEC defensive coordinator job at the age of 29 and didn't get it from the benefit of being a former player, a former notable guy who's, it's going to get your foot in the door more. It's not going to make up for the fact whether you do or don't know ball, but it's going to get you there a lot easier. And he didn't get there via that way. I do like also that even with Shield Wood leaving for Texas Tech, you kept around most of your 2024 position coaches. Mm-hmm. Yes, Wood was the guy calling the defenses and is clearly over his time at U of H and his college coaching career generally shown himself to be quite good at it. You did also lose cornerbacks coach Zach Etheridge to the same position at Miami, but last year's defense isn't as good as it is without good work by your position coaches like Oscar Giles with the defensive line, with James Ross with your rush ends, or Josh Christian Young with your safeties, those guys who are all still here on staff. So we'll start up front and kind of work our way out with the Cougar defense. Bobby, what are your thoughts on this defensive front and what it could look like in the coming season?
I actually love what the staff did in the portal. You did lose Anthony Holmes, which, sucks. But you were able to bring in some really good talent. I think your Holmes replacement's going to be someone like Joshua Donald from App State, 6'1", 320, had 32 tackles for loss in an App State defense. And that App State team was actually pretty, if I recall, like I just looked at it briefly, was actually a decent team last year. It's not like he was out racking up stats on a bad team or something like that, but he moved up from Southern to App State and is making another jump. I actually really kind of like that. You saw him go to App State and his statistics greatly improved when he went to App State. What's going to happen when he jumps up again? Just a big body. I love the size and the disruption he seems to provide in the middle. If you look at his sack numbers, they don't exactly scream out to you that this guy is this complete game changer. But if you just a little ball knowledge tip here for anybody, if you're looking at a nose tackle or a defensive tackle, you don't always want to look at their sack numbers or even their tackle for loss numbers, because when you have 3 down linemen, their job is just to occupy space and be a little disruptive in that and let the linebackers get the tackles. I kind of went through some of App State's linebacker tackle numbers, and they had quite a few with their linebackers. So I think he played his role really well at App State. You know, another reason to be excited is you got to keep Carlos Allen, right? Carlos Allen, it just seemed he was everywhere last year. Every time a play was being made, you needed a play. It just kind of seemed like Carlos Allen, while again, the sack numbers weren't exactly there, he just always seemed to be the guy getting pressure on the quarterback or, making him a little uncomfortable. Maybe it doesn't count as a quarterback hurry. Maybe it doesn't count as a sack, but you saw Carlos Allen like getting in the backfield a little bit, pushing his lineman into the quarterback, things like that. Like I kind of went back and watched a little bit of tape, and Carlos Allen just seemed to be everywhere. And I think he was one of the biggest surprises last year. I think we were a little concerned heading into the season with the D line a little bit. And Carlos Allen was a real bright spot. Like I said, just always seemed to be near the ball. And when I saw him at media days, you could just tell he was ready to be a leader on the team. And then finally, I kind of found this interesting. You bring in Eddie Walls from FIU. He's projected defensive end starter for the Cougs, according to Phil Steele. I kind of looked at Phil Steele. He has him down as a defensive end starter. But his previous school, FIU, had him listed as a linebacker. And the Cougs also have him listed as a defensive end. So I think you're going to get a lot of athleticism there. And that more ties into the type of defense that you're playing, right? He's a down lineman in one. He's a pass rushing linebacker in another. But the Cougs have him, like I said, as a defensive end. Either way, very excited to have him. He had 5 sacks last year, including 2 versus a very solid Jacksonville State team. I think that this D-line could be pretty dang good in 2025. What about you? What were kind of some, as you kind of looked at this defense, what did you see?
Well, I'm glad you brought Joshua Donald, the fact that he's already done one transfer up. The guy you just mentioned, Eddie Walls III, who I expect kind of like you to be more of a guy on the edge or rush end, has done it as well. He started his college career at the FCS level with Bethune-Cookman, took a jump to FIU, and I think showed some really solid stuff in his one season there in Miami. Yes, like FIU and Conference USA isn't the highest level of college football, but MEAC FCS football to CUSA is a big step up. It is a much better level of athlete. Does it guarantee that he's ready for the Big 12? No guarantee he can make that jump twice, but the fact that he's done it once is, I think, something that's noteworthy. Getting Carlos Allen back after losing multiple key projected guys in this defense was a big, big deal. We'll say Carlos Allen and Brandon Mack, who I expect will be your week 1 starter at the dog position, which is kind of your rush end. You'd prefer more experience coming back, but not really that dissimilar situation to where we were a year ago. Like last year, like you liked Keith Cooper Jr. coming in from Tulane, but he wasn't even an all-conference guy there his 1 year there. Carlos Allen, I didn't go back and listen, Bobby. There's a good chance that you and I maybe just mentioned Carlos Allen in passing. We certainly did not talk about Carlos Allen as much 12 months ago as you do now. And you couldn't blame us that much because he was coming in as a guy who had only played like 4 games in the 2023 season, had played exclusively for Kennesaw State at the FCS level, was due to take a big step up. And you really didn't know, but you saw last season was a very, very important guy, a guy important beyond, I think, what the box score would tell you. So mentioned Brandon Mack, mentioned Carlos Allen. Latravion McCutcheon is a name I keep seeing also as a possible guy at that dog position along with Brandon Mack. I
have him, not to interrupt you, I have him. Yeah, I have him at linebacker, and I'm going to talk about him as well under linebacker. So just, we're on the same page with McCutcheon there.
Khalil Lafau comes in from Wazoo as well. Played a pretty good amount there. Graded as the second best interior lineman from the 2 legacy Pac-12 schools. Always eye-catching to me when a guy plays a bunch on the interior line, either side of the ball, like Lafau did his first 2 college seasons at Wazoo. Takes a bit of a step up in competition to the Big 12, but a guy who, along with Donald and Carlos Allen, Quindario Lee, I'll mention Quindario Lee, a really big body guy. Didn't play a ton last year. I think he played 178 total snaps on defense, but enough that maybe he think he's ready for more competition. So there are guys there, but I think would acknowledge. Ideally, you would want Anthony Holmes coming back. If Anthony Holmes was coming back, I think you and I would be really, really bullish, as opposed to, yeah, like it could be a good group. I'm definitely more positive now than I was when I first sat down to kind of put my thoughts on this defensive line and kind of really preview this group. But it's fair to say there are some questions. I keep seeing Chance Bryant. I would say probably more of an end than an interior line guy, but Chance Bryant is one of the many early enrollee true freshmen of this team who I think we could see playing a decent amount on this defensive line sooner than later. You are going to be asking a whole lot of new faces to make key contributions out of this group, but like I said a moment ago, that was also the case last season. A year ago, you returned Anthony Holmes Jr., and that was about it in terms of guys with any real experience. Carlos Allen was a guy transferring out from the FCS who'd barely played the season before. Keith Cooper Jr. was an intriguing transfer, but had played a bunch on good Tulane defenses, but wasn't even all conference for them. So we can acknowledge the question marks, but that's also not kind of a guarantee of problems either. I was a really big fan of your current defensive line coach, a guy mentioned at the start of this preview, your defensive line coach, Oscar Giles. For the 2 seasons he was on the Tom Herman staff, you had really great defensive lines when he was there back then. Not just because you had Ed Oliver for the last year. That was a good defensive line in 2015 as well. Not that you were bad this season. Like Levine's last 2 seasons, for any faults of them, were generally pretty good defensive teams, but got more out of that unit and got a lot out of last year's unit too. Like I know everyone loved the previous defensive line coach. Like he was a big social media star. I think you saw last season a much, much, much better coach defensive line than you did either of Brian Early's last 2 seasons there. I'm not trying to slime a guy who's not here. I'm just telling you what I saw in 12 games of football last year versus what we saw the previous 2 seasons, which was guys being way out of position, being way upfield, and just getting killed anytime you faced a dual threat quarterback. So
yeah, you're exactly right on that. Sorry to kind of
no.
jump in there,
So that kind of undergirds
yeah,
my positivity is having Oscar Giles back with this coaching staff.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly with that.
Stop me if this sounds familiar. Your Cougar linebacker group is also replacing multiple key guys. Can't overstate what Michael Batten did in only 1 season with the Houston Cougar program. Incredibly cool story and an even better linebacker. Clearly a tone setter for last year's defense. But you also had Jamal Morris, who was one of your few returning guys on defense going to last season, finally had a productive season as a Cougar starter in 2024. He's also now graduated with Batten. I gave this away to you when we texted a little bit before this preview. This might be the position group I'm highest on in the preseason here, Bobby.
Yeah, I'll let you lead this one off, but just kind of initial thought before I did any research, just kind of what was in my brain is I was a little worried about the linebacker position. It's like, oh man. And then I started looking at it and I was like, actually, this might be a pretty good unit here. So what did you see? And then I'll tell you what I saw.
What I saw is that it's clear there is depth for either 2 or 3 linebacker formations. I had a list much longer than 2 or 3 guys that if you told me before week 1, these are your starters, I'd be like, yeah, I feel pretty good about it. Like there are a lot of different combinations of guys I think could be good here. You have the 2 former Tulane guys, Corey Platt Jr. and Jesus Machado, who are veteran guys who had experience playing under Willie Fritz. I mean, you saw the 2 defensive transfers you brought from Tulane last year were both dudes. Keith Cooper Jr., who I've now mentioned a couple times here, and then Kentrell Webb, who I think we'll talk about a bit more later when we talk about the Cougar defensive backfield. I don't believe I'm speaking out of turn in saying that if Corey Platt stays healthy at Tulane in Fritz's final year there, I think there's a good chance he's playing in an SEC program right now instead of us. Like, health is a big question, but this staff clearly still believes in him. Would be shocked if he's not in the opening week too deep. You have Jesus Machado coming off missing last year with an injury, but was the leading tackler on Tulane's best defense under Willie Fritz, the 2023 defense. Sione Fotu comes in from Utah, from one of the best defensive programs in college football. Was good enough there to play a fair amount. Worst case of healthy, I think he's a rotation guy for you. Carmicah Glass transfers up from U of H, was Law's number 2 tackler last year. I think a feat that's more impressive when you consider last season was the first one he actually got live Division I game reps. Yes, he's going to a higher level of football now, but your first season being a team's number 2 tackler in your first season on a good Sun Belt defense, and I would say a pretty high level of football, I think it's eye-opening. I haven't seen Jalen Garner's name as much in the preseason, but he's been a rotation guy these past couple of years. I saw another early enrollee freshman, Richmond Ugochukwu is another name. I think our friends Ryan at GoCougars.com and Martin at GoCougars.com mentioned him as a standout freshman from fall practices. You don't ever want to hand wave away losing veteran guys like Batten and Jamal Morris, but this is the only defensive position group where I'm going to come on here and definitively say I like U of H's depth here more than I did 12 months ago. Do I like any of these guys right now as much as I like Michael Batten? That's a little strong, like at this point, because Michael Batten was so good for you. And I don't know if any of these guys have proven that yet, but I like 1 through 5, 1 through 6. I like this group a lot more than I did a year ago. Now, the hard work is having somebody kind of be an equivalent tone setter and impact guy like Batten. So I think that's what I really like about this unit in previewing it before the season.
You know, a name I heard mentioned by just about everybody at media days, I think all 4 mentioned, is you mentioned him with the D line. I'm mentioning him at linebacker. That's kind of the beauty of this defense, is it's gonna shapeshift a little bit. But that is the younger McCutcheon Latravion. Everyone was talking about how well he is moving and just causing havoc everywhere on the field, which is something you want from that kind of that linebacker / D line position. You want him just, he's everywhere. You want him everywhere. And everyone mentioned him. So I thought that was an interesting takeaway from media days. And I might have mentioned it in my, when I talked about media days and what I kind of saw, but obviously you're hoping Corey Platt can come back from another injury. I think the transfer I might be most excited for is the transfer from Utah, Sion Fotu. He was a solid contributor for a really good Utah defense, right? The reason why everyone gave Utah the hype heading into last year was not their offense. It was going to be their defense. The reason why they're getting the hype this year is not necessarily their offense. It's their defense. And if you can get a guy who was a solid contributor for them, I kind of snuck my way into a Utah message board. Don't go there. I don't recommend it at all. It's a dark, shadowy place. No, and there was a lot of depression. They are not happy to see him go. So like I said, good contributor for a really good Utah defense. And I think the most exciting thing with these linebackers is, to your point, is the depth. I can make the case that any linebacker on the 3 deep should start. And we just did all this, and you barely mentioned Carmicah Glass or Jesus Machado. Like we've spent all this time talking about these players, and we didn't mention some guys who are coming in that we should really be excited for. I think once again, and I saw to what you said, Ryan. I saw Ryan mention something along the lines of like you could see this talent level raising, and I think many years ago, I think it was 2 now, our first year in the Big 12, we kind of were talking to, I want to say TCU, Jamie.
Jamie Plunkett.
Yeah, Jamie Plunkett. And we were asking him, and I can't remember if we did it on the pod or if it was just kind of us talking about how, like, what was the hardest part about the transition? And he was like, the depth. Like, you probably have guys who start who are Big 12 caliber players. In fact, you probably do. What happens, though, is midway through the season, those guys get beat up. And what do you do to sub those guys in? That 2 deep, that 3 deep isn't Big 12 quality. And that's just part of playing in the American Conference, right? That's just kind of part of it. You're not able to recruit that level of athlete to be on the 2 deep or the 3 deep. And now you're starting to see it. And I think this linebacker core is the exact perfect explanation for that.
In a reality that thankfully didn't happen. Like, let's say Michael Batten had gone down for 2 or 3 games, or Jamal Morris was playing hurt like the last half of the season. That probably would have gotten exposed on last year's defense. Thankfully, yes, that didn't happen. Thankfully, you had those 2 guys healthy or close to it for most of the season. Mm-hmm. I think, and hopefully all the guys we talk about are healthy, and we don't have to really find out how good this depth is. But I think if that happens this year, I think you're in a better place. I don't know if at the start of this year, and I think we're in agreement on this. I don't know if you love anyone right now, week 1 or 2, exactly as much as you loved as players Batten and Morris, but I would say give that group some time to gel, and I think we're both in agreement. It's a much deeper, it's a much more talented group than the one from last season, and obviously 3 years ago going back.
Yeah, and I think one of the ways that you're going to see them gel is, luck of the schedule. And by luck, I mean, you kind of create it with your own schedule. You get the start against SFA and Rice, right? Not saying that, like, we should go out and like Rice is an automatic. Like, I hope Rice is an automatic, but Rice has been known to beat us before. So, when you look at it, you hope that they take that time to gel, and then heading into the Colorado game, they'll be one solid unit and are able to perform like we saw last year.
Agreed. So the defensive backfield is the position group where I have the most questions, but you certainly can't accuse the staff of not trying to find guys in the portal at this position, or these two positions, I guess, cornerback and safety. Can you?
No, you. I think it was 7 guys from the backfield that transferred in. Like, it's like 6 or 7 off the top of my head. I don't have it. I didn't write it down, but
that an offensive line. DB is an offensive line. You cannot accuse the staff of not trying to find defensive backs and offensive linemen in the transfer portal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't even think it's because this defensive backfield was bad last year. I think you just lost some guys. You lost studs in the defensive backfield. You lose Halty, you lose Jeremiah Wilson. Obviously that's going to be worrisome. You don't love that. But I'd imagine those guys also got the bag. So, good for them, I guess. Better, this podcast is pro player getting paid. So, good for them, but I would rather see them get paid at U of H, but also, yeah, that's kind of just the way it go. But luckily you kept Latrell McCutcheon and Kentrell Webb, 2 guys who were very good for you last year. You're hoping they step up and really control the secondary this year. The good thing with returning those 2 guys is you return 1 safety, 1 corner. So now you got to find another safety, another corner, and then probably a nickelback. Would you agree?
Agreed, yeah.
Right. But I guess at corner, just kind of, I'm interested in what you think here, because like you said, there's so many pieces that have been inserted that, like, we don't really know. But if I were to guess, I'd probably say we're going to see Will James, the DB from Southern Miss, or maybe even someone like JD Rhyme. But I would lean towards James, just because Rhyme has been more of a special teams guy the last 3 years. Either would be fine. And I do think that safety number 2 is probably Blake Thompson, maybe Jordan Allen. Would you agree or disagree there? Blake.
No, I think I'd agree. I have some a group of guys I want to talk about, but gun to my head, I think your starting secondary is Latrell McCutcheon and Will James at corner, and obviously Kentrell Webb returning at safety, and then the two new guys. If I had to guess, maybe CJ Douglas coming from Sanford, who I've heard a lot of good stuff about in fall practice, but Jordan Allen definitely a candidate. And I think Rook Brown from Wyoming is I think Rook Brown is this year's Hershey McLaurin, in that he's the safety linebacker hybrid.
Okay, I like that.
3-year starter. Oh yeah, I know I was gonna bring it up then, but a 254 to U of H guy. I know you love repping the 254 area code there.
Let's go, baby. Syntax.
Rook Brown comes from Salado. Is that how it's pronounced?
Salado. Okay.
I'll
allow it. I was also intrigued by Blake Thompson. He comes from Louisiana Tech, where he got. This was interesting. I don't know how deep into Blake Thompson you went, because I was trying to piece things together. I found this kind of interesting. According to ESPN, he had 60 tackles last year. But if you go to the Louisiana Tech website, they credit him with 59 tackles. And I just thought that was kind of interesting. I was like,
you're trying to unwrap the mystery of this one tackle.
I'm sure I could have looked game by game stats and see which one was off. Shout out to our the podcast you and I listen to, Split Zone Duo, where we are going to get into a tackle controversy here like they did last year.
You're gonna make powerful enemies in the La Tech sports information department.
Yeah.
What I thought was interesting about Blake Thompson, he was able to get on the field. Like he played JUCO ball straight out of high school and then played 2 seasons at Iowa State. I think redshirted his first one, but was a rotation guy and actually started, I believe, their Baylor game 2 seasons ago. And Iowa State's a good defensive program. If you can get on the field at Iowa State,
Yes.
sort of like Sione Fotu with linebacker. If you're good enough to play some reps at linebacker for Utah, you have my attention. If you're good enough to play some defensive back at Iowa State for their defenses, like, you have my attention as well. And was a standout on a La Tech defense that was, you could make an argument. I think points per game might have been the best in the group of 5, certainly one of the best. I remember we talked about their defensive coordinator before the Austin Armstrong hire as somebody I really hoped U of H would give a look for there. I think he got hired by UNT or somebody. It was a slightly higher G5.
Yeah.
So was part of a good defense at La Tech. Wasn't just some guy who popped up stats on a bad defense. Was a guy good enough to get on the field at Iowa State and good enough to be a key contributor for a good group of 5 defense. So obviously going to a much higher level of competition here, but that caught my eye as well.
Yeah, and the reason why I kind of have him penciled in as a starter here is I think pairing him with McCutcheon seems ideal, but I also don't know if he necessarily transfers here without some kind of guarantee of playing time or starting. I think if you're an established guy, even if you're an established G5 program, or if you're established at a G5 program, I think if you're starting and your goal is to play at a high level, a level higher than college, if you want to play in the NFL, I think it might just be me talking here because we are it
is you factually, it is you talking, Bobby. No one can take that away from you.
No, but I know it's us talking as a former G5 fans, but it really feels like if you're going to want to play in the NFL, you want to be on the field, and if you are already on the field at a G5 program, you're not going to transfer somewhere to not get on the field. That's just kind of an initial thought I had on that.
Yeah, I would agree.
So that's kind of why I lean towards him being the starter.
So if you allow me, I want to break down all the guys who I think are going to be competing. Like, I think you and I have said our favorites, but give a full for the listeners who maybe the people who aren't brilliant like our patrons who listen to us break down the full 25 transfer class. We talked about a lot of these guys. Will James, Southern Miss's top cornerback last year, as a redshirt freshman. Won't sugarcoat it. USM was a terrible defensive team last season, but my surface level analysis was they were terrible against the run, fine on paper against the pass. Probably most of their opponents realized that we could just run all over these people and didn't throw on them more than they had to, but graded out really well by Pro Football Focus for a corner and run defense. And we do love a sure tackling corner here on this podcast. Had the most passes defended by a Southern Miss freshman since the year 2000. A guy we haven't mentioned who I think is really intriguing, Zelmar Vetter, is making the biggest jump in competition, probably from all the guys we're going to talk about here, but was also the highest rated portal recruit of the trio of cornerbacks I'm going to talk about here. Is really tall for a corner, listed 6'3", had 9 pass breakups and 44 tackles last season, which I think also speaks to being a sure tackling corner. FCS to Big 12 is a big jump, but I think Vetter is a worthwhile gamble by the staff. And another guy we haven't mentioned, Keone Parks, another bigger corner, listed 6'1", comes from Wyoming, where he was a starter last season, had 7 pass breakups, was one of Wyoming's top tacklers in both solo and total tackles. Also, I think speaks to being a pretty good tackler. Went from playing mostly on offense in high school, Bobby. Wyoming converted him to DB. So there's a chance there's a guy there we haven't even seen hit his full ceiling yet at the college level. No guarantee any of that trio of guys, James, Vetter, or Parks, ends up being as good as Jeremiah Wilson was for you last year. Would even go so far as to say the odds are slightly against it, but I think it's worth reminding ourselves that Jeremiah Wilson didn't come here last offseason as a super heralded transfer from Syracuse. He had gotten on the field for them a decent amount, but it wasn't like you and I 12 months ago were like, oh, this guy is going to be one of the graded out best corners, interception hawk. He's going to have a defensive touchdown. That wasn't us last offseason. He ended up being everything for that. So that's my point being, you don't really know what guys are going to be. No easy task replacing AJ Halsey. I think you and I have both said at this point. was probably the most active guy in your defense these past 2 seasons, and a big part of last year's defense taking the big step forward that it did. And you can't even do, to paraphrase the Moneyball thing, I don't think you can even replace AJ Halsey in the aggregate. Can't ignore the departure of Hershey McLaurin as well. Came in last year as a grad transfer, played that linebacker safety hybrid position quite well, but staff really looked for safeties in the portal. Jordan Allen from LSU started the first couple games last season for them, ultimately did lose his job, but also I think saw a fair amount of action 2 seasons ago as a redshirt freshman. Might not be an ultimately SEC starting level guy, but I think entirely fair to speculate that he could be Big 12 level, even if he was not good enough to maybe be an every game starter for LSU ultimately. I think the fact that he started last season as a starter for them, I think pretty eye-opening. CJ Douglas, mentioned him in passing a bit ago. He's a name I keep seeing in practice write-ups about fall camp. Taking a big step up in competition, but was a second-team all-conference guy for FCS Samford last year. Was one of only 4 underclassmen from any team in that league to be all-conference. I place a really large amount of stock, even at a lower level, in guys who were able to come in and be high-level contributors within their first 2 years of playing college football. I mean, see AJ Halsey. Like, he had a ton of tackles as a true freshman on a bad New Mexico team, but I think that ended up being indicative of a guy capable of playing at a really high level college football. And Rook Brown, mentioned bigger, from Salado. Bobby got me right on the pronunciation. Salado was a 3-year start, came from, I think, 3A or 4A football and started for 3 years at Wyoming on a couple of really good Wyoming defenses in the 22 and 23 seasons. I think the defense he played on fell off a bit last year, but I think that has more to do with Wyoming being one of the worst offensive teams in the country last season than anything Brown and the Cowboy defenders were doing. And again, to reiterate, continuing the pipeline that Bobby started about 20 years ago of people going from the 254 area code to the University of Houston. Blake Thompson also, guy I think we're both very intrigued about, kind of covered it pretty well. Key player on a really good La Tech defense in the group of 5. Rotation got Iowa State 2 seasons ago. Now, do we see in the 2 seasons since he's been at Iowa State, is he now capable of starting and being a difference maker for a Big 12 program? I agree with you. I don't think he's coming here if he doesn't think he can at least compete for that role.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I just want to go completely off topic here.
Do it.
Matt, props to you for if there's one thing you will do, it is stick to the bit. Number one, the whole time we're in Boston, you saying that I was mad for treason since I was born in England. And anybody who even comes from anywhere near Central Texas is like...
Look, Bobby was a good sport too. Bobby was not angry about all the various Revolutionary War stuff that we saw in Boston. He was a better sport about that than he was about seeing the Astros. But we'll leave that.
All right, buddy, you ready to talk about special teams?
Always. I was just I'm
sorry.
No, it's not much. I don't believe that the 2025 Cougar secondary will be better than last year's because AJ Halsey and Jeremiah Wilson, we've both said it, almost beaten it to death. Not easy guys to replace. But I think if you could split the difference between last season and the 2 seasons prior when you were mostly pretty terrible, I think that's still good enough to allow the Cougs as a team with an offense that we expect to be much improved to take a big step forward in the coming season.
I agree. I think that's it goes back to what I said about, this defense in general. It's going to fall back. I think you've lost too much talent for it not to, but I think where you're going to have to really see the success of that and that kind of theory is in the secondary. You lose the most talent in the secondary and you bring in the most unknown talent here, but I think kind of looking at stats and looking at things like that, I think you have a chance to not take a massive step back, which I think is what this unit needs to do.
Fully agreed.
All right, now are you ready to talk?
Now we're talking special teams.
Now we're talking special teams.
It gets overlooked what a pain point the 2024 offense was. I mean, it kind of stares you when you average 14 points per game. That kind of stares you in the face as a big gaping flaw for a team. Cougar special teams were not good last year. Something I think Willie Fritz has generally prided himself on is teams that are very good at special teams weren't good last year. I think some areas you were good, but too many mistakes in coverage. You had returns wiped out by hold. Like I remember at least one Makai Muse return touchdown that got wiped out because of a dumb holding call by you.
Like a holding call, if I recall, that didn't even affect the return. Just
Correct.
like
stuff like that. It was kind of part and parcel of the season. So also like the offense, it is kind of a, hey, you mostly have nowhere to go but up here. And I like some of the answers you have, and you weren't bad at everything. I think Liam Doherty was a bright spot as a freshman, and you get him for potentially 3 more seasons. I think that's exciting. But yeah, I think need to improve this area. And I think kind of like the Cougar offense, there's solid evidence that that's ultimately going to be what happens here. From everything we've seen and read this offseason, one more shout out to GoCougars.com here. The place-kicking battle sounds like a 2-way race between your 2 veteran transfers, Ethan Sanchez, who comes in from Old Dominion, and Zach Yoakum from Notre Dame. Sanchez was super accurate on field goals last season at Old Dominion, had a long of 53. His only miss was a 58-yarder. I want to say they attempted it like at one of those like attempted it at halftime and, kind of as a hope and a prayer kick. So you're not really holding that against him. Was weirdly, just purely in the numbers, weirdly unreliable on point after tries last season. But I haven't broken down all those misses to see were there any mitigating circumstances there, a bad snap, bad blocking in front of him, something like that. And we'll just note that he didn't miss any point after tries his first 2 seasons at Old Dominion as their starting place kicker. Yoakum was a Notre Dame walk-on who got his undergrad degree, transferred to U of H to finish his college career. And I want to say as a true freshman, he was their kickoff specialist, but I think only appeared sporadically over the most recent 2 seasons. I think purely a guess on my part, just from what we've read, it sounds like we're going to see both these guys, at least, you're going to use kind of some game reps to determine who your starter is over the first few games of the season. At least that's what I'm reading to this, Bobby.
Yeah, that's kind of exactly what I have written down here. I think when it comes to kicking, field goals, things like that, I think I wouldn't be surprised if each guy gets a chance in those first 2 games. One gets game 1, one gets game 2, and kind of who are you more comfortable with when it comes to place kicking there. I think returns, you're going to have Makai Muse still back there, which is super exciting. Interesting little tidbit is they're really looking at getting the quarterback out there as well. Austin, why am I blanking all of a sudden?
Carlisle? As a return guy, yeah.
Yeah, having him out there. Everyone at Media Days was talking about how he was possibly the fastest guy on the team, and you can tell Fritz just wants to get Carlisle out on the field and get the ball in his hand in some way, somehow. So really interesting there. I think he did a good job summing up the place kickers. I believe that I think that you're going to see, like I said, that competition for a second, and whoever wins. The kid from Notre Dame was a kickoff specialist. I wouldn't be surprised to see him just kind of take that role over here. I think both guys were looking at not being the kicker at their program anymore, and we're told that you can come here, battle for it. You can live in a great city and battle for the starting kicking job at U of H. Also kind of underlooked is the hiring of Chris Couch as a special teams coordinator. Just kind of want to mention that there should be an improvement just by having a dedicated special teams coordinator. I know Fritz likes to do that himself, but yeah. Punts, to be honest, haven't been a major concern the last couple of years. Ever since we started that pipeline to Australia, things have looked pretty good for the Cougars on the punting. So, like I said, I think it's interesting at kicker. I think it's going to be Ethan Sanchez, and I think Yoakum, like I said, will be the kickoff specialist. Like he was at Notre Dame, Sanchez just seems that he's been a little bit more consistent in his history with those kicks. So I think kick returns, like you said, with a coordinator, I'm hoping that you get a little bit of trickery, not necessarily trickery, but you shore up the fundamentals, and you might actually have a couple of plays kind of written up for returns.
Punting is the easiest and shortest position preview we will have. I would go so far as to say for both the episodes we're going to do.
Yeah,
Liam Doherty's
absolutely.
back, had a really strong freshman season, and long may U of H's Australian punter dominance dating back to the days of Dane Ruggie. I feel like those three guys, I can't remember which game for Roy and the guy in the Lane Wilkins. It took me a second.
Lane Wilkins, yep.
I feel like early in both of those guys' freshman year, and I think Doherty had like a bad punt, not a shanked
I know exactly
one, but
where you're going with this. Yes.
they each had like one bad punt at like some point early on in their freshman season. And then from there, just like figured it out, and it was just one of those like,
it's
set
like
it, forget it kind of things, and that's exactly what you want your punter to be if you're a college football fan. Is like you don't want to have too much stress about the position or where's this kick gonna go.
Yeah, it was like freshman year, they kind of struggled for like 2 or 3 games, then had like a ridiculously bad punt, and then like you said, maybe they finished that game a little shaky, and then the next week they just came out and just started hitting bombs, and you were like, go. Sounds good to me.
I think we're fine here. I don't think we have any anything to worry about. We haven't mentioned him yet. Mekhi Muse. I would say mention Austin Carl. Did you?
I did. I said he comes back as a returner. That's very exciting.
That's on me, the listener. I'm not going to edit this out. Like I want you to hear me, Mescaver. That's on me. I would bet he's your first choice return guy, but Bob, you already kind of said that. I've also seen Jacquise Martin mentioned as a return guy along with Carlisle. I know Carlisle is an interesting weapon. That's kind of an interesting story, like third string quarterback potentially out there. He mentioned also his like baseball background as part of I think helping him with learning something entirely new on a football field. But if I had to guess, if we see somebody that's not Mekhi Muse returning kicks, and SFA is a good candidate for trying shit as a football game. I bet we see Martin at least try to take a couple returns there from Bryan, Texas there. I would imagine of the many things that stick in Willie Fritz's craw from that first season he was in charge here at U of H, none stick in there more so than the special teams play. And if U of H can be noticeably better there, that's going to be as much as any offensive improvement or avoiding defensive backsliding, what's going to get you to that 6-7 win mark and a statement that your program has continuously improved. And I see a lot of evidence they can get there. I see a lot of evidence that the defense might not be 100% of its 2024 form, but that this staff that has shown itself to be good at evaluating guys has some interesting potential answers to those questions. And I don't leave this preview of these two position groups, I think, with unrealistic optimism, but I think I'm more optimistic now than I was, we'll say like a week and a half ago when I kind of started doing my notes here.
Oh no, man! My expectations are unrealistic. We're going 12-0, bud.
You're drinking the Kool-Aid over there.
I'm way on the Kool-Aid in every unit that we're going to talk about. I am deep in the Kool-Aid, which is funny because of how pessimistic I was last year. Last year I was like, nah, man, this they may play better football, but this schedule's brutal.
Just hard to see it now. Now you're just like, no, you're all in.
I'm all in, baby.
So we'll keep the optimism going. Talk about another Cougar sport, the Cougar sport that will be kicking off their season this week. That is your Houston Cougar football program, soccer, I guess, as we call it here in the States, a program with an exciting new head coach. So I think before we get to the team, I want to start this out with a 30,000 foot level question, if you'll allow me, not one that you need to do any research on.
Okay.
I think we kind of like to start this with kind of a vibes gut check question, acknowledging that I think both of us are more optimistic about this program simply having a new head coach. Yes. I think that we would have if it's like, okay, we're going to year 4 of Jaime Frias, an expiring deal. I think we'd all know how this is going to end. I think we'd be a lot more optimistic in any circumstance. What would it take you in the most general terms to, after a few weeks of the season, buy in that this team is going to be at least some level of improved from the previous few seasons that we've talked about this program?
To be honest, man, I just need to see some goals. Like I know that sounds like super basic, but
I'm laughing because that might be my answer here in a few minutes.
Because, like, dude, you just kind of go back and look. The leading scorer had like 5 goals on this team last year. 5. We scored 4 in Big 12 play. I think, they had the scrimmage versus Rice, and didn't the Cougs win 4-1? Am I recalling that correctly?
Yes, you're recalling that correctly.
4-1 in the scrimmage. And I think I jokingly was like, I think that may be more than we scored in the Big 12 all last season. And you were like, funny thing, bud, it might be. And then you looked it up, and that was how many goals we scored in Big 12 play.
It was exactly 4. As many. 4.
And I know it's a scrimmage, right? And so you're subbing more liberally, you're trying things out, but like that's like I'd be okay if we lose to like look, not to jump ahead of ourselves, but like if we're playing Sam Houston and you lose 4-3, am I concerned? Yes, but Jesus, man, we put up 3. I'm cool with that. You know what I mean? Like that gives me hope that something is different. Look, am I going to say that you need to win UTSA, Sam Houston, lose to Texas, then beat UL Monroe, McNeese, SFA, UTR? Like, no, I'm not expecting you to go undefeated in non-conference play. I'd love that, or even one loss to defending SEC champion Texas, or, I want to see some goals, man. Like it wasn't good last year when we talk about, the offense. It was just so bad. And I'm not saying that, you need to score 50 goals or anything like that, but all last season, man, I know you just did the research, but how many goals do you think that that U of H scored last year? All season.
Because I know the Big 12 one, but I don't know the season one. Just roughly 12.
11.
Ugh.
But if you scored 2 goals in a game, like that's pretty good. I'll take it.
Yeah, if you're going to be a significantly improved team, obviously, not saying anything groundbreaking here, it's going to have to be more than just an improved attack. But to me, that'll be a good indicator if this project here with Ben Williams is ahead of schedule. If you immediately see that kind of attacking quality that we saw in kind of passing in a scrimmage situation where you don't want to take it too seriously, but hey, it's a nice little preseason data point. But if you see attacking quality out of the gate, I think that tells you in an off season that this staff was able to do something pretty dramatic, fix an attack that you established statistically, Bobby, was pretty not good last year. If you're able to improve that much in an off season, that tells me the staff is cooking with grease. That tells me
Absolutely.
this staff's credentials are legitimate and that we could see something out of U of H that's better than 14th or 15th best in the Big 12, regardless of the goal tally at the end of the season. I just want to watch a game where U of H creates a lot of goal scoring chances and have some of them at least be dangerous,
Yeah, I want to watch a U of H game, a U of H women's soccer game where there's something exciting that happens. Like even the season before, I remember watching some of the games and it's like, hey, we're at least close and in this game. Like, and then the dagger would hit and you'd go, well, maybe we can. No, we're not going to score.
Yeah, we're out of this.
But like, dude, last year I think I tried to watch like full games, 2 or 3, and it was just like, this is rough to watch, man. So yeah, I want it to be fun to watch these games again and not a chore to do the podcast.
There will be some matches this season, probably that match against UT, where your best chance to get something out of it is to absorb pressure. It's to have less the ball, probably get outshot by a good amount by your opponent.
Baby. Park the bus.
Park the bus, exactly. And get those chances to counterattack and maybe catch your more talented opponent sleeping. But if Thursday night U of H comes out there and attacks with the same effectiveness that they did in the scrimmage against Rice and scores a number of goals and looks fluid in attack, that to me, even over a 1-match sample size, is justification for belief by us or any U of H fan that, hey, maybe this version of UH soccer might be better than the last few were. So yeah, I'm fully on board. I was laughing at the start of you saying that because I think essentially without us communicating between each other what our answers to this question would be, I think we came to the same place.
Yeah, absolutely. So
I know we've talked about the Ben Williams hire in the show at least once or twice previously, but I think worth a recap at least quickly if you haven't paid as close attention to it. Kind of late last offseason, your previous head coach Jaime Frias resigned. Frias had been here for 3 seasons, none of which were especially good. Over that time, U of H won a combined 4 AAC/Big 12 matches. Frankly, Frias did U of H a favor to resign instead of coaching into his final contract year, where I think U of H assuredly would have been just as bad, if not worse, than the previous 3 seasons. Happy trails to Jaime Frias, who, as much as any U of H Olympic sport hire in a decade of doing this podcast, really pissed away the hard work and success of his predecessor. And I don't want to be too mean. U of H soccer is a hard job, but Frias inherited a program that was coming off, quite frankly, getting robbed of being in the NCAA tournament in the fall of 2021 and returned a bunch of players to that team, and in his few public comments acted like he was taking over a total rebuild. But enough of my sour grapes. Despite how late the hire had to be made, I really do think Eddie Nunez hired a good one in Ben Williams, who most recently was the head coach of the most improved team in Division I soccer last season, Stephen F. Austin, who won the Southland Conference and went to the 2024 NCAA tournament. Before that, Williams was an assistant at the UTSA and Miami, Ohio women's soccer programs. But I think the most intriguing item from his resume was that Williams coached elite grassroots soccer, which, if you know a little bit about basketball, basically the soccer equivalent of AAU for Houston area's Albion FC. Basically, any player, if they are remotely close to being a Division I soccer player, just a serious high school player, is also playing ECNL soccer, which is where Albion FC was in, which isn't your traditional CV for a college head coach, but I would bet over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see a lot more coaches in the college game with Williams' kind of resume, as opposed to maybe Frias's. And I said this during our bold predictions episode, something early that really stood out to me is the fact that several SFA players and multiple assistant coaches from his time at SFA are here now. That's not so super unusual these days, but I think it speaks positively to what he's building here. You lose your top 2 scorers from last season. Your leading goal scorer, Juliette Moore, graduates, and your second leading points getter, Ariana Jimison, transferred to Baylor. But you have a good number of holdover players back for 2025. You don't treat returning production the same way as you would returning off of a good team, but practically, you also don't want to be replacing 25 to 30 players in an offseason as well. 3 of your top 4 minutes played leaders from last season are back: Charlotte Richardson, Lainey Gonzalez, and Alex Whitcraft. The goalie who started the back half of the season, including your one Big 12 win, Maggie Manning, is also back, though she'll have competition at her spot from FAU transfer Lexi Gonzalez and SFA transfer Logan Pilgreen. I would like to start with the defense, Bobby. Defense is probably the group I feel strongest about and probably undergirds most of my optimism about this team, because you have a couple of players I just mentioned, Charlotte Richardson and Alex Whitcraft, back multi-year starters, basically every match starters the last 2 seasons. Gonzalez also, started all of last season at U of H after coming in from the Memphis program, I believe. Ella Morgan follows Williams from SFA, where she was a 3-year starter in the 2024 Southland Defender of the Year. And you bring in a couple of TCU transfers, Ellie Harrington and Blake Hodgson, who both played a decent amount as rotation players at TCU, which is one of the Big 12's premier women's soccer programs. You also have Jada Gibson, who started 14 games in her previous 2 U of H seasons. It kind of goes back to, if you want to go cross sports here, it's kind of like what we talked about with the Cougar linebacker group of football. Like, you have so many possible answers to the question here that I think you can find whether you go 3 at the back, 4 at the back, you can find a much improved defense with a better coaching staff, which I think we have, and 3 or 4 of the players I just mentioned as starters, with, I think, a good rotation group around those. So you're not having to play those players potentially 90 minutes without a break.
Yeah, I think kind of looking at the transfers, and really there were a couple, but you just saw that you're returning 3 of your top minutes getters, and being 3 of your top minutes getters are on defense. It's clear Coach Williams is in on this group, I think. Not sure the formation he's going to run, but he does get back all 3 starters from last year. And you can look for big seasons from those 3 players, like you mentioned, Raisa, Gonzalez, and Whitcraft. They played a ton last year, and I would imagine they're going to do it quite a bit more this year as well. The fact that you do return your 3 starters and you brought in a couple of transfers, like I said, you really see the belief that Coach Williams has in this defensive group, just in the fact that he didn't feel he needed to bring in a ton of talent there.
Yeah, but also, Ella Morgan's taking a big step up in competition from SFA to U of H in the Big 12, but if you're going to be taking up a step up in competition, like, not a bad place to start with the Southland Conference Defender of the Year. Good candidate, even if Williams doesn't go to their job, to transfer up for her senior season and see how high of a level of college soccer she can play. And I think a good candidate here to join that, I think, strong group of returners and make a really good defense.
Yeah,
I'm curious about who's going to win the goalkeeper job. You have
Yeah.
Maggie Manning. Like she started when you beat Arizona last season, had 12 saves against BYU. Like I think you don't.
That's
it
an
was her
insane number of saves,
yeah
by the way.
her freshman season. Like you don't want to hold like the negatives against her because it's like, hey, it's her first college season. Did allow 3 or more goals in 5 of her 9 starts as a freshman, which I don't think is all about her. I think we've well established you weren't a very good team last season, and hanging that all on like one player, I think
That's very unfair.
wouldn't be responsible. But she's gonna be pushed. Lexi Gonzalez started 47 matches the last 3 seasons at FAU. Logan Pilgreen comes from SFA, though she was out injured the previous 2 seasons. So we'll be interested to see if off that pretty long layoff that she's your starter. If I had to guess, and it is purely a guess at this point, it would be Manning or Gonzalez starting between the pipes against UTSA. But I think you have interesting answers to that question, and I think with a good defense in front of them, we pretty well established. You feel pretty good about whoever Williams and the staff picks.
Yeah, for me, I would kind of lean towards Alexi Gonzalez just as a graduate kind of final year player. I think going back to like what I said about some people on the football team, kind of cross sport here. I don't think that you transfer, even though you do come closer to home for your final season, considering she's from McAllen. I don't know if you necessarily transfer after playing all those years in college if you don't at least have an inkling that you're going to be the starter. So I would lean towards Lexi Gonzalez. All that experience is also really hard to ignore. But yeah, I think it is going to be interesting to see who's between the pipes in a couple of days.
Midfield also has a good combination of returning experience and intriguing transfers. Another super senior, you have Jaden Humbird coming in from LSU, where she started 20 matches these past 5 seasons for a good SEC program, maybe looking to finish her career in a bigger role at U of H. Another SFA transfer, Ava Shannon, who was an all-conference selection both of her seasons at SFA, and as a sophomore was the Southland midfielder of the year. I think she's a really exciting ad. She's probably one of your starters. Morgan Donahue was another critical midfielder at SFA who follows Williams here, transfers up for her final college season. And you have a couple of returners with starting experience, KK Kaiser and Casey Maddox. There isn't as much depth here as defense, but there's enough here between the returners and incoming transfers that I can believe this will be a improved group from last year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an improved group for sure. It's clearly a space Coach Williams wanted to improve with. You could just tell by the sheer amount of transfers he brought in at that position. While I will be the first to admit that I am not an absolute soccer X's and O's kind of guy, I do know that if you control the midfield, you can control the game, and it is very clear that Coach Williams wants to do that. Bringing in the 2 SFA transfers, like you mentioned, shows that he wants to do that. It should be interesting to see what he does formation-wise and in terms of pressing and defensive things like that in the midfield as well. It seems like he's throwing a lot of pieces out there. Like you said, there are a lot of parts here. It kind of feels like, not to jump ahead of a preview that we're going to do next week, but it definitely feels like where you bring in a bunch of talent at a position like the offensive line, like the football staff is doing with the offensive line, and seeing what sticks. That's kind of what I got out of the midfield. I'm not as excited about the midfield as I was the defense, but I certainly think that he brought in a lot of really good players there, and he's going to kind of see what works and what gels together.
For me, the biggest unknown is going to be in attack. I think that's where we have the most questions to answer. You do return Cameron Maddox, who had 7 goals in her Cougar debut season in 2023, but only had 2 last season in 12 starts. I saw Amanda Adams, who played a decent amount as a freshman last season, had a really nice goal in that scrimmage win against Rice. Maybe she's a candidate to take a big step up in 2025. Adelia Gonda, a former Albion FC player for Williams, comes back to Houston after playing her previous 3 seasons at Oklahoma State, where she had 4 career goals and 9 career starts. You also have Jocelyn Chinea and Sabrina Tabor coming in from Georgia and Cincy, respectively. There are some answers as to who's going to be your go-to attacking players, and I think it will help no matter who is an attack for you. It will help if you're better, it's not breaking soccer analysis here. If you were a more solid team at the back, if you have a more fluid identity, all that stuff, you're going to be better in attack no matter who's there. Obviously, I don't think it's unfair to say, though, this is the group where you have the most question marks. In the preseason, though, I think generally we would expect them to be better just because I think the structure around them will be a lot better.
Yeah, for me, I think there's a lot of exciting players here, but I don't know if there's a lot of proven players here. You kept arguably your best player in Cameron Maddox last year. You mentioned Sabrina Tabor from Cincy and Gonda from Oklahoma State. I would imagine that you're going to see a nice rotation of Gonda coming in, and I think the Gonda Maddox kind of combo could be a really good one this year. Again, not trying to break any news here or be this top-notch analysis and act like I'm this like 100% expert on women's college soccer. I'm not, but I've done a little bit of research. I do think that combo is going to score more goals. And like you said, if you're better in the midfield, which, like I said, Coach Williams didn't seem to be too impressed by what he saw when he got here, so he brought in a lot of talent there. I think if you could shore that up and get more scoring opportunities for those forwards, I think that's what we're going to see this year.
Fully agree. Quick thoughts on the opener. Thursday night, the Cougs will travel west on I-10 to take on the UTSA Roadrunners, where Ben Williams and current assistant Ben Mulamba coached 2 seasons ago. Actually, they were on staff for the Roadrunners' lone winning conference record under this head coach, Derek Pittman. Mulamba also coached semi-pro soccer with Alamo City SC in San Antonio, so I guess a homecoming of sorts for both of those guys in the coaching staff. The Roadrunners were below 500 in American Conference play a season ago. We know from our time there, American Conference soccer is pretty strong. They lost 2-1 to U of H last year, but also that season won 5 of their 9 home matches. They do lose their top goal scorers from last season, return starting keeper Jasmine Kessler, and their minutes played leaders from outfield players Zoe May and Cameron Closa, which is significant. My short and quick assessment, UTSA isn't such a good opponent that you, me, or anyone listening should make really strong and bold proclamations that U of H can win decisively on the road with new staff and a lot of new players. But they're a strong enough opponent that you can't go the opposite direction and say, if U of H wins this game and wins it convincingly, well, that's not a good enough opponent to take anything positive from it. If U of H can go out there and get a pretty convincing win on Thursday night, you, me, and everyone else should, I think, be pretty stoked about it. You don't need to go over your skis and start making reservations for being a top 8 team that qualifies for the Big 12 tournament yet, but they're a good enough opponent that I think a win would mean something, but not such a good opponent that I think you should drastically change your priors if the Cougs can find a way to win in the Alamo City on Thursday night.
Yeah, I think if you are going to be a better team this year, you kind of want to win this game. You kind of need to win this game. I'm not saying that it says a lot if you lose like 5-4 or something like that, but in their exhibitions, they blew out A&M Corpus 6-0 and lost to a really good, like we mentioned earlier, Texas squad 2-0. Again, their preseason scrimmages, you're subbing more liberally than you would anywhere else or anything like that. But I don't know if this is necessarily a game that if you win 5-0, you should be like, oh my God, this team is the greatest team ever. It's kind of hard to get people excited and then be like, I mean, if you lose, if you win, we're more looking for signs in this game than anything else that this team is headed in the right direction.
Yeah, just how the team looks for the 90 minutes of footy.
Yep.
The team Cougs also play non-D1 St. Mary's on Sunday on campus, which I am going to mention here and then not mention again because it's a non-Division I opponent, man.
Yeah,
really we're talking about.
Much
as we're excited about this team, much as we will consume as much Cougar soccer as our lives allow, and hopefully have a season that Bobby and I have to we have to find the logistical challenge of how do we work the Cougar. Hopefully it's good enough that's hey, we can't not talk about Cougar soccer. They did X, Y, and Z, and I think that could be the case, and that I think alone excites me.
I just want to be excited when I pull up ESPN Plus on a random Tuesday and I'm like, oh yeah, women's soccer's on. Let's pull that up.
Yeah, man, as I say, that's why I wish you could have been here like 4 years ago on the pod, because Dustin and I genuinely were like, it was appointment viewing for us when it was just the two of us doing this podcast 4 seasons ago, the fall of 2021. And
yeah,
it felt like, because we'd had the coaching staff on the first season, we had Diego and then one of his top assistants, Blair Quinn, who's now the defensive coordinator for Texas Tech, on the show. So it was cool to see like a long and slow build from a staff that we really liked come to fruition. Hopefully it doesn't take 4 or 5 seasons for this staff to build it. But I think if nothing else, and I don't think this is setting too high expectations, we're in for a more exciting soccer season than the last few.
Yeah, I think a big thing is kind of like last year's football team is like, I just want them to be better. Like, I don't necessarily need to see 5 more wins or qualifying for the Big 12 tournament. I just want to see them being better. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So,
all right, buddy. All right. It's been an episode. Take us home.
Well, I think that's it. Thank you guys so much for listening to a good, probably hour 10 minutes worth of Cougar content, maybe an hour 15 once we get some edits down. Not that there's a ton that we need to edit here, but
all these edits are my fault, by the way. Like, you're listening 75, 80 minutes into this thing. Just fully candidly, there's stuff that has to be edited out, and I want to, in the public record, none of it was Bobby's fault. It was all 100% Sam this week. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there.
I also like the caveat this week because last week I had a couple.
It happens, man. It happens.
But no, we appreciate you guys so much for listening. We hope that you guys are half as excited as we are about Cougar Sports returning. If you like what we're doing, please go to patreon.com/SH podcast. We're going to do some really cool stuff this year in terms of Sam and I were actually discussing it earlier this week, some really cool stuff on our premium feed. If you want to give us some feedback, you can find us on social media at SH Podcast on Twitter. You can find us at Blue Sky at podcast.bsky.social. That's pod, PAWD, for those of you who are new listeners. Sometimes you got to throw that out there, Sam, because you never know if somebody's listening for the first time. If you want to email us your feedback, because you were smart and swore off social media this year, and to be honest, you're 8 months in, you might as well stick through it for the whole year. You're not missing much as somebody who's on it. You can email us at shpodcast@gmail.com. And Sam, what do we always say?
Go Cougs, buddy.
All right. Go Cougs! Let's go!